He secretly amassed a worldwide empire over the course of nearly half a century. Marjorie Rieu was André Rieu's rock. He was his writer, manager, and fiercest advocate, and the engine that propelled him to stardom. Collectively, they conquered the classical world. However, she is now departing. After a disastrous turn in André's health, everything changed. Beneath the glitter, something crumbled. As the rest of the family celebrates André's 75th birthday, Marjorie is quietly packing up and leaving. She was the one who kept everything in order. Where is she now? Everything started to crumble. The so-called king of the waltz, André Rieu, was determined to maintain his 2012 level of performance. With his Johann Strauss Orchestra, he seamlessly traversed international borders, played to sold-out stadiums, and aced interviews, features, and performances for international media. For decades, it seemed like nothing could halt him, not even jet lag or sick days. However, an issue arose in July of 2010. At 3 in the morning, André decided to get out of bed when he and his wife Marjorie were on vacation in Belgium. Not metaphorically, but literally, everything around him was spinning. He felt as if the floor had collapsed under him as the ceiling and walls twisted and tilted. Sweat beaded down his face, nausea engulfed him, and he could hardly stand. He dismissed it at first, thinking it was probably due to exhaustion. During the past week, he had been working extremely hard, fitting in studio recordings, Spanish classes, and last-minute preparations for his tour. Additionally, he believed that maintaining an optimistic and active lifestyle could ward off illness. But he couldn't hide his face in this. Even in the morning, the vertigo persisted. What happened was the exact opposite. The virus that impacts the inner ear and creates issues with the vestibular nerve was found to be responsible for his vestibular neuritis. Balance is controlled by that nerve. A bloated brain sends jumbled signals that make you feel lightheaded, disoriented, and nauseous whenever you move. André suffered greatly as a result. He was experiencing more than just a slight vertigo. He struggled to maintain his balance, practice, or even grasp his violin without experiencing a sensation of the room spinning. When he secured a performance in Amsterdam for the following week, things took a turn for the worse. There were 60,000 people in queue to see him, so it was no small event. However, this time, there was no miraculous comeback. His doctor only gave him one piece of advice: rest. Following that incident, André and Marjorie both experienced a decline in their situation. For Rieu, Marjorie is more than merely a spouse. The silent motivator behind all of his actions is her. She has a background in music composition. In addition to being a language teacher, André has been her husband since 1975. Not only have they been together romantically, but they have also been creatively, practically, and emotionally close for over 40 years. While André travels the globe, Marjorie manages the empire's business. She writes, keeps him from wasting time and energy, and manages everything else. In 2010, however, no such thing as a business plan existed. André was forced to postpone his Australian tour and subsequent performances in the UK. Lighting crews, orchestra members, stage managers, and transportation teams were just a few of the hundreds of jobs that were necessary for these massive stadium events. These weren't your average night out on the town. His ability to pay bills was dependent upon 120 individuals. His monthly expenditures exceeded £825,000 sterling, 0 pence, even in the absence of his own income. Thus, Marjorie found herself smack dab in the middle of an economic hurricane when he fell ill. It wasn't merely a personal issue. Marjorie maintained order in their Maastricht home, which André had envisioned as a castle since he was a little boy and had been built in the 1400s. Despite André's best efforts to ignore his illness and continue working, she took care of the mail and, most importantly, ensured that he stayed focused on getting better. Because he made an effort, in the end, he persisted. He sought medication, attempted to walk, and practiced. but to no avail. No, his body told him. According to Marjorie, he wasn't being tested for strength, but rather for how much longer he could endure. How amusing is this? This occurred after André had believed for a long time that he was immune to burnout. Only by maintaining an optimistic outlook could he prevent himself from collapsing. He was certain of it. Unfortunately, he had reached his limitations, as all artists do. He was unable to sustain a 3-month tour streak. He struggled to stand. Apologies for disappointing everyone, he thought. Even his grandkids couldn't engage in play with him because of his extreme exhaustion. In the past, he has compared his persistent perspiration to menopause. Although his jokes were humorous, it was evident that this wasn't a simple ear infection. Rather, it served as a wake-up call. Dr. Smith and colleagues ran tests. To rule out the possibility of a tumor, he underwent a brain scan. The scans were clear, but the recovery was a real challenge. He couldn't find a cure. No magic pills or treatments existed. He needed to attend physical therapy, retrain his balance, and do some tedious but essential exercises, such as standing on one leg and alternating between staring up and down and side to side, every 3 hours for half an hour. Although it was painful, the effect was gradual. However, the mental anguish persisted despite André's physical improvement. The dread of relapsing permeated every aspect. Recurrence of vestibular neuritis occurs in approximately 5% of cases, and stress is a major risk factor. André had to reevaluate his entire life and all of his plans. It was at that point that Marjorie returned. Together they made 2 lists. The things he enjoyed most about his work, such as creating albums, performing live, and playing music, were all listed on one list. Meetings, business talks, public speaking, attending news events, and running the business were all things that drained him. The second list had a substantially longer one. It was cut by both of them. They altered his goals and removed his calendar. They made a pact that from now on he would focus solely on music, and Marjorie would shield him from everything else. It was a matter of life and death whether you made that decision, not merely of how much labor was required of you. In reality, André wasn't as powerful as he appeared on stage, and Marjorie knew it. Even the most basic tasks, like going to the loo, were embarrassing for him as he was weak from a fever, sweating profusely and clumsy. She remained by his side, making sure no one noticed how near he was to breaking. When they were in a partnership, it was never about showing off. On rare occasions, Marjorie will accompany him to a public performance. She went so far as to say that she hoped no one would remember her as André Rieu's wife. She stands out, does her own work, and has independent thoughts. However, their true strength becomes apparent in situations like these. They were co-parents to 2 boys. Their grandchild count has increased to 5. They call the castle home, the very place where young André honed his piano skills. Even when everything around her seemed to be spinning out of control, Marjorie never lost her footing. In spite of the fame, mayhem, music, and attention, she has managed to accomplish this. And he returned to performing in 2013. The doctors were wrong. He recovered much more quickly than expected. Although he felt more stable after therapy, eye exercises, and lifestyle changes, his fear persisted. Additionally, Marjorie's role evolved. No longer was she merely lending a hand to a nomadic musician. As she watched the man she loved reach his breaking point, she did all in her power to prevent him from doing it again. So admirers don't always consider the effort required to keep André's dream alive when they see him smiling and leading a 60-piece orchestra today. Even the woman who helped keep things together when they started to crumble goes unnoticed. Exactly what Marjorie said, considering that was merely the first step. An additional wake-up call in 2017 caused André to reevaluate his priorities, health, and decisions. First and foremost, this time, the anxiety wasn't due to external factors like a tour postponement or bug. Rather, it originated inside. André realized he needed to make a permanent change after his second major health scare in as many years. Leading a 60-piece orchestra on the road non-stop, keeping track of production details and satisfying fans around the world became a full-time job. Even though he wasn't paying attention before, he was physically waving the white flag. A personal trainer, a fresh eating regimen, and a rearranged schedule all worked together to help him become stronger, more energetic, and more rested. Rather than being an act, this was a life-altering move. Not only did he start exercising frequently to stay with his orchestra's fast tempo, but he also wanted to keep from actually falling off the stage. His instructor supported his holistic recovery by modifying his diet and closely monitoring his movement patterns. Furthermore, the consequences could not be disregarded. He felt better, slept better, and moved faster. However, that was not the last thing. As a result of their leader's transformation, his musicians felt inspired to join in. Not long after, the entire Johann Strauss Orchestra joined in. While on the road, artists were registering for marathons, arranging Zumba classes, and making use of hotel gyms. Health ceased to be an afterthought and merged into the background routine. If you're curious about how a man in his 70s watches shows that start at 8 p.m., that's another thing. Rest, discipline, and the support of a team that follows his lead for 5 or 6 days straight across multiple time zones until midnight. André will now maintain a small group size. His son sent him photos of his grandkids via text message before each performance, and he keeps family portraits in his violin case. He suspends his ring from a chain rather than his finger so it won't fall off during the performance. Not merely routines, but the very bedrock of our lives. When you're on the road and singing your heart out under the bright lights of a stage, it can be helpful to have little things that remind you of home with you. Having a home in Maastricht is about more than simply showing off your wealth. There, Marjorie sits on the sidelines, far from the cameras, and watches every show. Achieving fame is not necessary for her to have an impact. Writing his biography, arranging his shows, taking care of the details, and keeping him focused on what's important have all been part of her over 4 decades of shaping his every move behind the scenes. The chemistry that first connected them in the 70s is still there. She first laid eyes on him at a social event hosted by his sister for her middle school pupils. After all those years apart, they fell head over heels the moment they laid eyes on each other again. Although some disagree, the parents of André weren't sure that Marjorie was the right choice for him. Her flower power soul clashed with their rigid regulations. Regardless, they persisted. Both individuals came from very disciplined backgrounds and were taught the value of hard work at a young age. They were able to build everything they own because of that drive. By 1978, he was a member of Gemma Serpent's lounge band and the Limburg Symphony Orchestra. Pregnancy announcements were made by Marjorie at about the same time. Caring for family, teaching music, and finding gigs in nursing homes were all demanding tasks. Things were absolutely out of control, and it would be an understatement to say that they persisted. Marjorie assisted in drafting talking points in the times between songs. At event stands, she helped book shows and also put together handouts. They aspire to play in theaters and travel the world, but for now, they're content playing free concerts for a handful of people in basements. Strauss & Company, 1994, and its viral hit The Second Waltz were their big break. It wasn't luck. Piece by piece, it took years to construct. Nevertheless, there were moments of difficulty. Their 2008 Schönbrunn Palace replica nearly bankrupted them. The fact that Marjorie's account was losing money at a faster rate than it was gaining it kept her up at night. Contrary to expectations, she maintained composure, intelligence, and safety. Pierre, André, and Marie's son eventually joined the company, bringing a more practical business acumen to complement André's artistic side. She continues to shun the limelight even now, refusing to do interviews or share new photos with the media, unless absolutely required. In order to remain anonymous, she continues to use her birth name. That is determination, not fear. Although Marjorie prefers to remain out of the limelight, André becomes more extroverted with each tour. This harmony allows them to unwind together. When André is at home, he takes his time. Every night for supper, he whips up nutritious, well-thought-out dishes. They enjoy André's orangery, where they can relax in peace. Underneath Tuscan-style paintings, this indoor garden features exotic plants, colorful butterflies, and koi fish swimming around. Not only does he unwind there after a day of touring, but it also serves as a fresh start before their next major adventure. Where did André get the strength to push himself so hard? Despite the odds being stacked against him, who advised him to stake everything on his dream? To begin answering this question, one must look no farther than André Rieu's Jewish father-in-law, who had a profound impact on his life and career. Even though Edgar Coleman was never famous, never played an instrument, and never even held a baton, André could hear him in every note. The Holocaust was a reality for Edgar. His dad took flight from Berlin and sought refuge in Maastricht in 1932. Remaining family members arrived 2 years afterwards. Edgar was taken into hiding by a Dutch girl named Nellie while the war was going on. Eventually, Nellie became Andrew's mother-in-law after she wed Edgar. Nellie was extremely daring. She stood up for the Dutch and did her best to ensure the safety of Jewish families. Years later, an Israeli family thanked André in writing for saving their grandmother's life. That incident remained ingrained in his memory of the marriage he was a part of, rather than as some distant tale. Subsequently, Edgar's records arrived. When André wed Marjorie in 1975, he gained more than just a business partner. He entered a new realm of auditory experience. Vinyl records were Edgar's favorite thing in the world. He had over 300 songs in his collection. From that collection, André discovered a new language, a new style of music, and a new rhythm. André had previously spent his formative years immersed in the music of composers like Bruckner, Bach, and Beethoven. On the other hand, Edgar's record collection exposed him to opera, 1920s jazz, and yes, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. For someone who came from a very regimented and formal singing family, it was like entering a whole new world of vibrant colors. It wasn't enough for André, he really absorbed everything. That record collection served as the foundation for the MRI Salon Orchestra's inaugural performances. All the way down to the brand, the music and the atmosphere were heavily influenced by Edgar and Marjorie's early tastes. Everything about it was Edgar's taste, from the energy to the nostalgic mix of fun. Edgar evoked feelings rather than rational thought. He walked André through the process of connecting with the essence of sound. That impact is still being felt today, decades later. At nearly every one of his performances, André plays the world-famous klezmer song, Hava Nagila. In 2010, he performed it, and since then, it has become one of the most popular classical music videos on YouTube with over 14 million views. It's not going to work. Edgar, history, and the resilient people who rebuilt after devastating loss are all things of which you should be proud. André is still proud to wear that weight when he plays in Israel. While the crowds chant and wave flags, he responds with local songs such as Jerusalem of Gold, seamlessly incorporating each culture into his global tour. Since 2018, he has made an annual return to Tel Aviv for what has been more of a social gathering than a concert. Edgar's legacy continues in the shadows. The narrative continues to guide him. That is why he uses music as a form of celebration. He was aware of how near the end it all was before it even began. Just keep dancing, have hope, and keep moving forward. That's the message. Even when there was a lockdown, no shows were canceled, and the stages were empty, André continued moving. He made Magical Maastricht, a unique virtual event, by baking cakes for his neighbors and combining video clips from previous shows. From December 19th through January 3rd, the event was streamed, allowing fans from all over the globe to experience the emotion, enthusiasm, and reminiscence without ever leaving their homes. He was moving at a steady pace. Further still, he persisted. When he turns 75 in 2025, the world will watch The Dream Continues as a celebration. A front row seat to a legacy, not just a list of his biggest hits. From New York to Vienna, Bahrain to Sydney, André curates a journey through his finest shows from across the globe. A stunning performance of Music of the Night by the Phantom of the Opera is among the many highlights. An emotional duet featuring his brother Robert and the song Pew Tool about their shared childhood in Maastricht is one of them. In the spaces between his songs, André shares stories, anecdotes, and life lessons derived from a foundation of love and perseverance. Emma will be up next. She began touring the globe with André and the Johann Strauss Orchestra in 2024. Among her many destinations are Mexico, Chile, Bahrain, and Colombia. Her presence on stage signifies that André's backstory continues to expand. Nothing is going to slow him down. Working with others, he is bringing fresh voices to the mix and ensuring the practice's continued existence. It's incredible that a young man from Maastricht, who started out with a discarded violin, eventually became one of the world's most popular classical musicians. Taking a step back, we can see a man who was brought up in a very traditional household, a young couple who put on concerts for the elderly, and a dream that was kept alive by vinyl records and the will to survive the war. An international career that crosses generations and genres. The one who kept the lights on but never stole the show is the one who had the most impact. Edgar Coleman laid the groundwork for the music, and Marjorie continued it by honoring her father's legacy in every decision, arrangement, and performance. Just because Marjorie is bidding farewell to the spotlights, tour buses, and late nights spent backstage today doesn't mean she's finished. It's because she took the necessary steps. Although André is the center of attention, she was the one who set the stage. Even though it was only a spark, she clung to the dream. As André performs to sold-out crowds in Tel Aviv, Sydney, and Vienna, Marjorie finds a peaceful spot to sit and watch. From war-torn Berlin to stadiums on 5 continents, she knows that every note brings their story. Notoriety was not necessary to begin this journey. There was unapologetic support, love, music, and strength. So what's the next step for the music? Yes, that is the final inquiry. The continuation of the waltz is an obvious response. The orchestra is still performing all over the globe, Emma is advancing in her career, and André has just turned 75.